Master Windu, Anakin Skywalker said, his voice tense with urgency. I have information that may be of use to you. Mace turned to the young Jedi, his eyes meeting Anakin's. He could sense the anxiety and concern radiating off of him, and he knew that this was no trivial matter. What is it, Anakin? He asked, his voice steady. Anakin hesitated for a moment, his eyes darting back and forth as he weighed his words. I believe that Chancellor Palpatine is the Sith Lord we've been searching for, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Mace felt his heart skip a beat at the words, his mind racing as he concerned the implications. If Anakin was right, it would mean that the Chancellor was the very person they had been fighting against for years, but he couldn't simply take Anakin's word for it. Are you sure? He asked, his voice firm. Anakin nodded, his expression grim. I've seen things, Master Windu, he said, things that make me certain of his true nature. Mace considered this for a moment, his mind whirring as he weighed his options. If Anakin was right, it could mean the end of the war and the salvation of the galaxy, but if he was wrong, it could mean a disaster. Finally, he made up his mind. Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Anakin, he said, placing his hand on the young man's shoulder. If this turns out to be true, you will have gained my trust, but for now, I must ask of you to stay at the temple. I will handle this. Anakin looked at him with pleading eyes, his brow furrowed with concern. But Master, the Chancellor is too strong to be taken alone. You need my help. Mace shook his head firmly. No, Anakin, he said. I cannot risk your involvement in this. Stay here and await further orders. Anakin looked like he wanted to argue, but Mace had made up his mind. He could sense the turmoil coursing through the young man's veins as he feared that Anakin would try to get involved despite his orders. So he turned to two of his most trusted Jedi allies, Kit Fisto and Saesee Tiin, gesturing for them to stay with Anakin and make sure he was safe. Make sure he stays here, he said to them. I'll take care of the Chancellor. With that, he stepped onto the transport, accompanied by Master Kolar, and took off towards the Chancellor's office. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, and Mace knew that he could not fail. Kit Fisto walked with Anakin, his calm and reassuring presence providing a much-needed comfort to the conflicted Jedi. He knew that Anakin was struggling with the weight of the situation, and he tried to offer some words of encouragement. Master Windu is just looking out for you, Anakin, he said gently. He knows that you are a valuable asset to the Jedi Order. He doesn't want to see you put in harm's way. But Anakin was too consumed by his inner turmoil to listen. He was angry and frustrated at being left behind, feeling like he was being treated like a child. I don't need to be babysat, he muttered, his voice laced with resentment. Kit Fisto and Saesee Tiin waited outside the council chambers as Anakin entered alone, giving him the space he needed to process his thoughts. They knew that this was a difficult time for him. They wanted to be there to support him if he needed it. Meanwhile, Mace Windu had arrived at the Chancellor's office, accompanied by Master Kolar. The Chancellor was waiting for them with a smile on his face, his demeanor calm and collected. Master Jedi, what do I owe the pleasure? He said smoothly, his eyes flickering with amusement. Mace wasted no time in getting straight to the point. Chancellor Palpatine, you are under arrest, he said firmly. The Chancellor's smile quickly faded, replaced by a look of surprise and anger. Are you threatening me, Master Jedi? He said, his voice laced with venom. Mace stood his ground, his eyes fixed on the Chancellor. The Senate will decide your fate, he said, his voice steady. The Chancellor scoffed at his words, his eyes flashing with anger. I am the Senate, he said, his tone definite. Mace was unshaken by the Chancellor's words. Not yet, he said calmly. The Chancellor's demeanor suddenly shifted, his voice becoming calm and measured. It's treason then, he said, a dangerous glint in his eyes. Anakin sat in the council chamber, his mind racing with conflicting thoughts and emotions. On one hand, he knew that he had to help the Jedi in their fight against the Sith Lord, even if it meant going against his own wishes. On the other hand, he couldn't shake the vivid dream he had of Padme dying in childbirth and the desperate need he felt to prevent it from coming true. As he sat there lost in thought, he felt a surge of anger and frustration wash over him. He couldn't just sit there and do nothing while the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. With a determined look on his face, he rushed out of the Jedi chambers, determined to help Mace Windu with or without the approval of the Jedi Order. Kit Fisto and Saesee Tiin quickly stepped in front of him, blocking his path. "Anakin, wait," Kit Fisto said, his voice calm but firm. "You can't just rush in there without a plan. It's too dangerous." Anakin gritted his teeth, his eyes blazing with intensity. "I have to help him," he said. "I can't just sit here and do nothing." The Jedi exchanged a knowing look, silently acknowledging the truth in Anakin's words. They knew that Mace Windu could use all the help he could get, and Anakin was one of the most powerful Jedi in the Order. "Fine," Saesee Tiin said, nodding his head, "but we're coming with you." Together, the three Jedi rushed towards the Chancellor's office, their lightsabers drawn and ready. As they arrived, they found Mace Windu standing over the prone figure of the Chancellor, his lightsaber pointed at his chest. Anakin felt a surge of relief wash over him as he saw that Mace was still alive, but his relief was short-lived as he saw the look of determination on Mace's face. He knew that Mace was about to do something drastic, and he had to act quickly to stop him. "Mace, wait," he called out, stepping forward. "We can't just kill him. We need to bring him to trial." Mace turned to him, his eyes blazing with anger. "He's too dangerous to be left alive," he said. "We have to end this now, before it's too late." Anakin felt a shiver run down his spine as he looked at the Chancellor laying on the ground, his face twisted in an expression of pain and fear. Mace Windu felt a surge of satisfaction as he stood before the defeated Chancellor Palpatine. The Sith Lord had put up a good fight, but in the end, it was the Jedi who emerged victorious. As he looked at the Chancellor, he could sense the fear emanating from him. Palpatine would look at Anakin with fear written all over his face. "I told you it would come to this," the Chancellor said, his voice shaking with fear. "The Jedi are taking over!" Kit Fisto, who had been standing nearby, quickly interjected. "The Jedi are not taking over," he said firmly. "We have won, and now the Chancellor must stand trial. I agree with Skywalker." For a moment, he considered his options. He wanted to kill Palpatine, to end the Sith Lord's reign of terror once and for all, but he knew that such an act would go against everything that the Jedi stood for. They were not executioners, but guardians of peace and justice. Mace Windu, taking a deep breath, had centered himself, drawing on the Force to calm his emotions. With a steady hand, he reached out and took Palpatine into custody, his eyes fixed on the Chancellor. "You will stand trial for your crimes," he said firmly. "The Jedi will see that justice is served." The Jedi sat in stunned silence as they listened to Chancellor Palpatine's words echoing throughout the Senate building. The trial had not gone as they had hoped. The evidence they had gathered had not been enough to convince the Senate of the Chancellor's guilt, and now he was turning the tables on them. "Fellow members of the Republic," the Chancellor began, his voice ringing out across the chamber. "A tragedy has occurred today. On the cusp of victory, we were attacked by a group we considered to be friends. The Jedi feared that I would not give up this so-called power that I have after the defeat of the CIS. Instead of trusting the process and trusting you, my dear senators, they took it into their own hands and threatened my life." The Jedi could feel their frustration growing. They knew that the Chancellor was lying, but they had no way to prove it, and now he was twisting the truth to his advantage, using their failed attempt to arrest him as evidence of their treachery. "The Jedi proclaim themselves as peacekeepers, but their actions time and time again prove otherwise," Palpatine continued. "In fact, if anything, they have shown us the weakness of the stability of the Republic. By ending this meaningless trial, we can move forward to protect what we have come to know. I suggest we target the true criminals. I shall leave it to a vote. Convict me of crimes I have not committed, or allow me to continue as your Chancellor and deal with the enemy that grows within our very home." Mace Windu could feel the weight of the moment. The fate of the Republic hung in balance. If the Senate sided with Palpatine, the Jedi would be branded as traitors, and the Sith Lord would continue his reign of terror. He stood up and spoke. "We Jedi are not above the law. We will accept the decision of the Senate, but let it be known that the Force will guide us to the truth." The Senate voted, and to the dismay of the Jedi, Palpatine was cleared of all charges. As the Chancellor walked out of the chamber, Mace Windu could sense a dark cloud hanging over the future of the Republic. He knew that their work was not done yet, and that the true enemy of peace and justice was still at large.